Number 10, What If? Since Disney's What If drops in mere weeks, we have to kick off the list with Volume 2, Issue 74, titled What If Mr. Sinister Formed the X-Men? In this What If, we find Cyclops and Havoc being raised by Mr. Sinister himself. What a happy, healthy home to grow up in. So Scott was leading this team of what he thought was heroes. The team consisted of himself, Havoc, Sabretooth, Madeline Pryor, and Sauron. So they of course ran into the X-Men, the current team being led by Marvel Girl, who Scott was immediately attracted to, page 15 and 16. Cyclops feels like he's known her his whole life at this point. He feels the connection and it changes his entire outlook on mutants. He only feels warmth and concern with her. But Mr. Sinister said they were traitors. How can this be? Maybe the guy named Mr. Sinister lied to Scott. Number 9, Mr. S. The alternate future of Earth X shows us a world that could go, well, either way. Every human was given superhuman abilities after the Inhumans' Terrigen Mists were released into the atmosphere. So now a team of X-Men just looks like a regular bowling team. They're a team of superheroes in tights in a world where everybody is a superhero. I mean, it just doesn't really look that cool anymore. In this future, Cyclops himself becomes a teacher and leads an entirely new team, because there's of course a handful that ought to be struggling with their new powers, like he once did. Scott led this new team until they were an effective unit, and then 3 years later, Scott and his X-Men team joined Mar-Vell in his journey to collect powerful artifacts to kill Death, and then, build a paradise in what used to be the realm of the dead. When Mar-Vell did kill Death, a new problem came to be. Now nobody on Earth could die. Which sounds pretty good, but it was actually really sad and everyone just got old and sick. So Scott would now communicate with the Phoenix Force, who is in the realm of the dead. Ouija board not included. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us out. You're amazing. Now let's get right back into this list. No more wasted time. Number 8, Scotty Summers. Scaling back to the year 1602, the era where if you could do bed mass, you were deemed a witch and then subsequently killed. That era. So superheroes existing back then would surely cause a stir as well. Mutants on this Earth 311 were referred to as witchbreed and were constantly being hunted down. Now when he was first found, his chest was branded with an X. He eventually meets with other heroes, most notably Carlos Javier, who saved his life and then invited him to the school of witchbreed. And no, I don't mean Hogwarts, the other one. Number 7, House of M. Scott Summers from Earth 58163, also known as the House of M reality, we find Scott in a much better predicament when we first see him in House of M issue 2. So this is a reality where Magneto has now lost the war and his daughter Wanda, aka the Scarlet Witch, lost her mind. She couldn't get a grip on her powers or reality for that matter, so Xavier gathers the Avengers and X-Men to figure out a game plan. They get to Genosha to talk to Wanda, but then when they get there, Wanda, Magneto, and Quicksilver are nowhere to be seen. Reality itself has changed. Peter Parker wakes up, and now he's married to Gwen Stacy, who used to be dead, instead of MJ. And then for Scott Summers, well, his life is great in this altered reality. He's happily married to Emma Frost, and they live in a mutant world. Layla Miller came in to break the bad news to Scott that this peaceful family man lifestyle was all Wanda's doing. So Scott was of course on board when it came to getting reality back to normal. Number 6, Scotty Noir. Coming from Earth 90214, the Noir universe, we get a darker take on Cyclops and also more realistic. See, in this universe, Xavier wasn't tapping into the minds of the world's finest, but instead he opened a school that trains sociopaths how to be the best criminals. It's dark and not just in style. I mean, the story alone, Jean Grey's dead body gets washed up onto the shores of Welfare Island, so the X-Men were trying to figure out a murder case. That led to them also discovering the deaths of police officers around the city. Just a grim tale. Now there's no spandex or monologue. Scotty instead wears a suit, a gangster hat, and just a red visor, for the Sin City look. And as for weapons, he carries with him a pair of twin revolvers. A little bit different than our usual 616 Scotty. Number 5, Summer Scott. aka Starbolt, Summer comes from Earth 80827. She first appeared in New Exiles issue 9, the Soul Awakening storyline. She dives in during part 3. At just a young age, she was recruited into Emma Frost's X-Force, and the training here is quite brutal. Once her and her fellow X-Force team members meet the Exiles, they get defeated easily. Summer's team just isn't coordinated enough yet. But both teams later on combine their powers when they attack the French. Yeah, they take on a fleet in order to save the Queen. How epic is that? This universe's Bobby Drake, Orion, freezes the water while Starbolt rides a snowmobile towards the ship, of course using her optic blasts. It really doesn't get better than that, folks. I don't know what to tell you. Number 4, Basilisk. Okay, a little less fun than ski-doos and the high seas. We now look to the Age of X timeline where mutants were despised and treated horribly. Scott, now known as Basilisk, first appears in Age of X Alpha issue 1. I made fun of Scott's visor in the Noir universe a little bit with like regular glasses, but here he doesn't even get one. In fact, he doesn't even get eyelids anymore in this universe. He now resides in Alcatraz where the guards control where he looks, when he looks, and who gets executed because of it. He's literally a living weapon. He finally figured out a way to control his mask and then he broke out, freeing all the other mutant prisoners, but that's a long time to not have eyelids. What a horrible, horrible time. He must win the staring contests that all the cellmates do. It's so mean. Sorry, Scott. Number 3, Sheriff Summers. Coming straight from the rootin' tootin' Wild West, Sheriff Summers makes his first ride in the pages of Extreme X-Men Volume 2, Issue 4. Dazzler and the team have to destroy 10 evil versions of Charles Xavier, and they of course have the help of, well, Xavier Head. The team meets the sheriff in the following issue, and he's blasting away on his horse next to Colossus, page 6. It's nice to see him here after what we just talked about. Now he's a sheriff, he's not a prisoner executing mutants. We're on the right path. I'm just kidding, evil Xavier was using him as a pawn. But we're getting better, we're getting better. Number 2, Ray Summers. The Amalgam Universe, so much fun. In the pages of DC Comics back in Smash Comics issue 14, the Ray made his first appearance. There's a link. He was exposed to extreme sunlight and lightning at the same time, and then in turn got these energy powers. So when you combine him with Scott Summers in JLX issue 1, you get the lovely Ray Summers, aka Apollo. While other amalgams are obvious and quite out there, like Super Soldier, Superman, and Captain America, this one's basically just Cyclops with more power. Sunlight makes Ray stronger, although he was raised from mutant-fearing parents that kept him locked inside, telling him the sun will kill him. Kind of like Nick Swardson from the Benchwarmers, for the select few who have seen that. The OG few who've seen that. He can absorb energy from the sun and blast it then out of his eyes. I don't blame the parents for being afraid, that sounds pretty wild. And finally, number 1. Ultimate Cyclops. The 1610 universe, aka the Ultimate Universe, this version of Summers first appeared in Ultimate X-Men issue 1. The team was younger in this run, so Cyclops was only in his teen years. But even so, he was leading this team. He would disagree with Xavier often, even going so far as to join the Brotherhood at one point. Scott can squash beef for the greater good. He allows Wolverine back in the crew, even though he previously tried to kill Scott. But he did end up with Jean Grey. It only took him a few years to get the courage to admit his feelings. Now, after his time as headmaster, Scott had a substance abuse problem. He was addicted to this drug called Banshee, so Jean had to help him through that one. Now, when Magneto's ultimatum wave hit New York and wiped out Scott's friends and teammates, he himself executed Magneto. But these wars don't end, so naturally Magneto's speedy son Quicksilver came and got payback using the same bullet that took the life of his sister, the Scarlet Witch.
In at number 10, Becoming the Phoenix. Now I know this version of Cyclops is from the 616 continuity, but the storyline arc for Avengers vs. X-Men saw a tremendous change in power for Scott Summers. When the Avengers got wind that the Phoenix Force was attempting to approach Earth again, they stopped at nothing to prevent the X-Men from getting their hands on it. The X-Men, well, mainly Scott, believed that the Force needed to merge with Hope Summers to breathe some new life into the mutant race. Although when Tony Stark tried to stop the Phoenix Force and prevent its destructive aspects, he accidentally split the Force into 5 pieces. Each of these pieces then merged with the X-Men, with Cyclops being the only one to hold onto it for the longest amount of time. After his allies were defeated, the Force would then leave them. With Scott now having the lone power of the Phoenix Force, he became inebriated with power for which he used to oppress those living on Earth. He was so strong and unstoppable that it took Nova, the Scarlet Witch, and Hope Summers just to stop him. In at number 9, Space Pirate Cyclops. This has to be my absolute favorite version of Cyclops for that name alone. His sweet name aside though, the Space Pirate Cyclops is one strong mutant. Not only does he fly around in a spaceship as the leader of the Starjammers, he also carries 2 swords. How cool is that? Hailing from Earth 1298, this world is flipped on its head. We see heroes becoming villains and vice versa. Except for old Scotty Summers, he's just out in space living that pirate life with a slick grin on his face. The only real difference between this Scott and the others is the lack of control that he has over his optic blasts. In at number 8, 1602. Coming at you from the Elizabethan era, don't let his funny name fool you, this version of Cyclops is hella strong. In this era, Scott, or Scottius, and his fellow mutants are actually referred to as Witchbreed, which, just like in the 616 makes them outcasts amongst the humans. He does hold a lot of the same powers and abilities as his 616 counterpart, but imagine those powers in 1602. If we're viewing this alternate reality of Cyclops in this place and time, he would be supremely more powerful than anyone else living in that world. In at number 7, Earth 2182. This version of the X-Men is actually Nocturne's reality and is said to be set 20 years into the future from the 616. In this storyline, a feud began between Scott and Wolverine after the Shadow King controlled Wolverine and made him kill Professor X. Cyclops didn't care, and no matter what the case was, he could never forgive Logan for what he had done. When Scott left the X-Men, he created his own team and enacted vengeance. This version of Cyclops was so strong that he almost killed Wolverine. He too shares a lot of the same powers as his 616 counterpart, and along with the usual visor he wears, this version also has a metallic arm that can be used for combat. In at number 6, Ultimate X-Men. Hailing from Earth 1610 and making his first appearance in the 2001 issue of Ultimate X-Men number 1, this universe explored the X-Men origins set in the 21st century. Although this universe is very similar to the 616 continuity, it's not entirely identical. The team of X-Men in this issue are actually younger and therefore have less experience saving the world from evil. For the most part, the mutants have maintained their power levels except for Scott Summers. The Cyclops and Ultimate X-Men started taking this growth hormone called Banshee, which as a result dramatically increased his powers and abilities. Usually Cyclops can only fire those energy blasts from his eyes, but while on Banshee, he's able to harness this energy and use it differently. While on the growth hormone, Scott could fly and superpower his punches for a bigger impact overall. In at number 5, Earth 64894. First appearing in the What If Volume 2, number 64, this alternate version of Scott Summers has similar abilities to that of his 616 as well, except in this reality, Tony Stark sold his Iron Man technology, which then began a new arms race that ultimately led to the building of stronger Sentinels, These Sentinels were meant for hunting mutants, and a lot of the X-Men were killed except for Cyclops. The real strength of this version of Scott comes from when Magneto attacked the United Nations, plus threatened to end all of mankind. Cyclops was so strong that he felt confident enough to confront Magneto with the small team of X-Men that he had left. Eventually the team was overwhelmed, but the important thing to mention here is that Cyclops was the last mutant standing. Even in his final moments, his last words were promising that Magneto would be stopped. In at number 4, Earth 295. In this reality, Charles Xavier has been long gone ever since being murdered by his son from the future. This resulted in the Age of Apocalypse, which meant that humanity was nearing its extinction. In this world, Scott is actually known as Prelate Summers, which comes from a rank that he acquired while working in the army for Apocalypse. The main difference between this Scott and the 616 is that he is a literal Cyclops in the Earth 295 universe. In this alternate reality, Cyclops is an alpha mutant, which gives him the ability to absorb energy from his environment and then store it within his cells. His energy eye blasts are so strong that he can destroy adamantium and has even blown off the hand of Weapon X. In at number 3, Corporal Scott. Many of these alternate realities bear a striking resemblance to the mainstream 616 universe, but in the TRN 231 continuity, things are pretty different. This timeline placed the mutants in a pivotal role for the American Civil War era. Scott Summers worked his way through the army's ranks very fast and played a key role in turning the tides during the war. Corporal Summers didn't stop there though. He was so powerful that eventually his new mission became hunting down evil alternate reality versions of Xavier. You gotta be super strong to do that. In at number 2, Basilisk. This version of Scott Summers is from Earth 11326, and at the tender age of 14, he first discovered his powers completely by accident. A horrendous accident at that. While watching a movie in a theater, Scott's lasers blasted from his eyes, killing 7 people along with his own parents. He was then transferred to Alcatraz, which is where the prison governor Arcade discovered that using ruby quartz would help Scott control his powers. He was then fitted with this terrifying looking mask with the ruby quartz as lenses, and to make things more terrifying, his eyelids were also removed. His powers in this alternate reality though were used for very nefarious means. As the Basilisk, Cyclops was in charge of executing mutant inmates for the prison. Lastly, on our number 1 spot, Cyclops Deathlock. The deadly combination of Cyclops with the Deathlock technology was on full display in his very first appearance of the uncanny X-Force number 5 in the Earth 11045 continuity. The Cyclops Deathlock is the reanimated corpse of Scott Summers, and as such, still maintains the same powers that Cyclops has. However, with the Deathlock machinery controlling Cyclops using a computer brain and augmented bionic body parts, his powers were not just maintained, but greatly enhanced. The bionic parts not only added to his arsenal, but through its link to artificial intelligence, Cyclops was even protected from psychic assaults.
Number 10. Captain America. Scott Summers is seen as Captain America in the Ultimate X-Men Fantastic Four Annual from 2008. This version of Summers has no powers but has adopted Captain America's role after Steve Rogers dies of rapid old age, which is onset as a result of one of Reed Richards' experiments. This experiment also results in both Jean Grey and Scott losing their powers, leaving Scott to become Cap in an attempt to locate and kill Reed Richards. I love this character design, and if I were picking an X-Men to stand in as Captain America, I think Golden Boy Summers is a pretty good pick. Number 9. House of M. What If? No more powers. In this edition of the famous What If series, we get to examine a world where Scarlet Witch ended the House of M series by changing the world so that no one had any more superpowers. In this world, Scott Summers is no longer Cyclops, but just Scott Summers. In this universe, he ends up with on and off again girlfriend Emma Frost. However, when the Red Skull seeks to conquer planet Earth using a cosmic cube, he is one of the good guys who feels he must take action despite having no powers. In this world, some of the Fantastic Four, the Young Avengers, the X-Men, and the Avengers team try to team up and defeat the Red Skull. In the end, Spider-Man is able to snatch away the cosmic cube using his web shooters, which are produced by his web-producing bracelets. Although our depowered heroes take heavy losses, they win the day. Number 8. 1990s cartoon. This version of Cyclops for me is pretty iconic. I grew up watching this version of Cyclops, so it's always the one that comes to my mind when I first think of him. This is Teacher's Pet Cyclops, Golden Boy Cyclops. In the X-Men, the animated series from the 1990s, we get to see Wolverine and Cyclops bicker over who's better for Jean Grey, and throughout the series try to win her affections. Although in the end, Jean chooses Scott and they end up getting married. Cyclops also gets to fight many classic X-Men adversaries in the series, including Mr. Sinister and the Morlocks. Summers even reunites with some of his family, including his father Corsair and his space team the Starjammers. Though the two don't recognize each other at first, near the end of the series, Scott is set up to become the next leader of the X-Men after Professor Xavier. I mean, I think you can tell how much I enjoy this version of Cyclops based solely on my outfit. Number 7. President Summers. In the 100th anniversary special released in 2014, we get to see a possible world where Scott Summers is elected president. A world where he promises equality for everyone, humans and mutants alike. He promises this will be an America where no one will feel injustice, and says that winning the war is the easy part, but now we must win the peace. In this version, Scott ends up remarrying Emma Frost after the demise of Jean Grey. Scott's future face is illustrated with him having 2 red marks on either side of his face near his eyes. As a result of these markings, he appears to have more control over his blasts, although it is more likely that this is probably a result of his wife Emma's telepathic help, and the markings were adopted to make him look more future-y. Although in the comic we see that this is not a world that is ready for Scott Summers to be president, I do think a lot of what Scott promises is still relevant to what the world needs today. Number 6. Space Pirate. In the Mutant X comic series from 1999, we get to view a world where it is actually Alex, aka Havoc, Scott's brother, who met Professor Xavier and became the leader of the X-Men. Summers and Alex are the only ones to survive the plane crash in this version of the story. In this alternate version, Scott Summers still becomes Cyclops, but is also leader of the Starjammers. These Starjammers are comprised of Carol Danvers, Frankie Ray, Lockhead, Norrin Rad, and of course, me, Cyclops. At this time, on Earth 1298, Norrin and Frankie are no longer heralds of Galactus. This version of Scott Summers is a lot more quippy and fun, not very serious at all, which makes him quite different from a lot of his counterparts. He is really more of a space pirate in this universe. Think of Star-Lord a la the MCU Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 5. Starbolt. Starbolt is kind of the Rule 63 version of our Cyclops. Known as Summer Scott, she belongs to Emma Frost's X-Force team. She has the same powers as the Scott Summers of Earth 616 and a very similar look. Although there is a John Grey, aka Sunspot, aka Jean Grey, in this alternate world, it is Gambit and Starbolt who seem to have sparks fly. During a sea battle where the X-Force is attempting to save the Queen of England, Starbolt gets knocked off into the water and Gambit comes to her rescue, giving her a kiss in order to give her life-saving oxygen. But then he also gives her an oxygen pack. So it sounds to me like maybe he just wanted to kiss her. You can find this female version of the Cyclops character in the 2008 comic series Exiles. Number 4. Old Man Summers. For this alternate version of Cyclops, we turn to the comic X Factor Special Layla Miller edition from 2008. This version of Scott Summers is half cyborg. He has glowing eyes and no longer wears a visor. Cyclops in this story is an old man who is hiding out with his mutant daughter Ruby. This version of Cyclops lives on Earth 1191, a world where mutants are hunted down by sentinels and put in concentration camps or worse. Every day he waits for Layla Miller, another mutant, to come and visit him. One day she finally gets propelled into the future by multiple man Jamie Madrox, the same man Cyclops blames for turning him into a half cyborg. When Layla comes across Cyclops, he is originally upset that she took so long to get there and did not give him any indication of this future. However, she ends up apologizing and inspiring Cyclops and Ruby to continue the fight for mutant rights. Number 3. Sheriff Summers. For this version of Scott Summers, we look to the Extreme X-Men series 2012 edition. Set in a steampunk western world, think the 1999 film Wild Wild West, Scott Summers is a sheriff who is in a gang led by Xavier. This version of Xavier is using mind control to make those in his gang act ruthless and do his bidding. One of the things Xavier makes Summers do is fight Dazzler, who is traveling around with her own Xavier, albeit just a head in a jar type Xavier. Dazzler implores Sheriff Summers to fight the mind control, urging him that although he may be a cold fish in every universe, that he is also a hero. Eventually, Sheriff Summers does end up becoming free of Xavier's mind control and resumes his normal duties as good guy sheriff. I highly recommend checking out issues 4 and 5 of the series so you can get a good look at all the steampunk outfits and steam-powered things, like steam-powered horses. Neat. Number 2. Corporal Summers. Turning again to Extreme X-Men, there is another amazing version of Scott Summers. In this version, Scott is known as Corporal Summers, an African-American slave who was beaten every day of his childhood until his powers awakened. Corporal Scott Summers was trained by Colonel Fury and Dr. Xavier, who helped him learn how to control his powers. Though in this verse he still is seen wearing ruby quartz specs. Corporal Summers fought for the Union in the American Civil War, and though he was feared by his fellow non-mutant soldiers, the mutants' help in the Civil War made it last only 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. And this time, Corporal Summers managed to kill about 600 Confederate soldiers. Wow. Number 1. Basilisk. At the top of my list is probably the most ruthless version of Cyclops. Basilisk. He is also probably the saddest and darkest. I do love my dark comics. Basilisk's story goes like this. Scott Summers got his powers when he was 14 while he was in a movie theater. This resulted in the death of 7 people and his parents. Following this, Scott was imprisoned and later transferred to Alcatraz, a prison exclusively for mutants. Arcade, also known as Harcourt Teasdale, is in charge of the prison, and upon discovering that ruby quartz can be used to block the energy blasts that emit from Scott's eyes, builds and puts a mask on Scott after surgically removing his eyelids. Yeah. What I want to know is, who did that procedure? Are they okay? Are they still alive? This mask or visor is definitely the coolest looking one compared to any other visor we have yet to see the character wear. And that story basically tells you how dark this series is. Though don't worry, Basilisk does escape prison and manages to join Magneto's forces. He even meets another mutant named Frenzy, falls in love, and gets married, which is very Scott Summers of him. Number 10. Didn't have his priorities straight. I won't deny when I originally wanted to come back to the X-Men, I was more focused on running away. I was behaving recklessly as a result, and eventually it got so bad that the rest of the X-Men called me on it. Embarrassing. Storm ended up challenging me for leadership, and she kicked my butt too, unsurprisingly. I might be a great tactician and a master of trigonometry, but you know, these laser eyes that are really portals to another dimension filled with limitless energy, apparently, have nothing on what my teammate Aurora is capable of. And so I was unable to leave and forced to return to my family, with a lot of my fellow mutants judging me for trying to shirk my responsibilities to my wife and child. Number 9. Blasted Wolverine because he dropped a truth bomb. Some might see it that way anyways. I, however, feel like Logan was being very insensitive and disrespectful to Emma and I at the time. Wolverine basically saw Emma Frost and I together following one of Jean's many deaths and harshly judged me. What part of the mourning process is this, he asked us. First of all, he barged in on us, then he started accusing me of not mourning properly? Did I overreact by optic blasting him out of a window? Maybe. I don't know why Logan always has to goad me though. Why can't we just have a calm, reasonable discussion about our feelings? It's almost like he wants me to fight him. Number 8. Re-establish the X-Force. The X-Force is basically a mutant team for when there are missions that don't really fall on brand for the X-Men. Until we had the Hellions, they were kind of like our mutant Suicide Squad, except mostly made up of heroes instead of villains. But these were heroes who weren't afraid of killing when needed. The heroes who were more edgy than the rest of us. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge fan of the X-Force really, but I can recognize when the team is necessary, and I know when we need to use them and when it's time to bring that kill squad back together. Unfortunately, not everyone agreed with me. Some questioned my motives, while others have been known to judge me for ordering other mutants to kill while keeping my own hands clean of these deeds. Although in my opinion, ordering someone to kill makes me just as responsible, and it still greatly weighs on my own conscience, which I think is what many people forget. Number 7. Used young mutants as weapons. That's a harsh way of putting it. Professor X did a similar thing with all of us, and I guess a part of me was emulating him in a way. Although at least I didn't use a mutant to train other mutants and tell people it was just a danger room as opposed to a sentient being. But anyways, this became a huge controversy when I suggested that New Mutant Oya do what she felt was right when faced with a hard decision. Poor Oya was only 14 years old, and she already felt terrible about the accidental deaths she'd caused when her powers first manifested. So the wording I used there was poor in terms of providing guidance. I truly believed we were almost out of time and Oya was our only hope, despite Wolverine's pleas that he could still make it in time. As a result, Oya killed members of the Hellfire Club and everyone labeled me as someone who molded our young recruits into ruthless killers and dangerous weapons. Number 6. Exploited X-23. When we originally took Laura Kinney in, I wanted to utilize her, but Wolverine disagreed with me. We needed to get the X-Force back together. I needed that team. I went to Wolverine and explained why, and he was all for it. Although he did mention the fact that I was keeping it from Emma, which, yes, I'm not proud of. We needed to come up with a roster as the team had disbanded. I suggested X-23. Laura Kinney had been trained as a killer and she was highly skilled. She was perfect. But Wolverine felt differently, that she didn't have the life experience to make that choice if offered. I probably should have talked to Wolverine earlier about it, but I'd already offered Laura the spot and she'd accepted. I wanted to utilize her, but Wolverine saw it as me using her. Number 5. Cheated on Jean Grey. So originally I was personally all about Jean Grey. She was perfect for me, I thought, but I don't know. Even I have come to see that Emma, might actually be a better fit for me in the long run. Still, with that being said, it was pretty terrible how that whole thing started. Emma and I were having a psychic affair behind Jean's back. What's worse, I also may have had Emma dress up and emulate Jean within our minds. I mean, she was more the one who offered that, but still, she even changed her hair color. Yeah, it was not good. And what's worse, I knew it was wrong and yet I still went along with it. Eventually, Jean found out, telepathically walking in on Emma and I together. Definitely not a moment I'm proud of. Number 4. Almost made the Squirrels extinct. This one made the cut? Really? I feel like I was at least a little justified here, but I guess I could see how this might seem pretty bad, especially as, yes, not all Squirrels are evil. During Secret Invasion, however, I was desperate. I wasn't sure we'd make it, and so I had to take some pretty severe action there. The plan I came up with was to use the Legacy virus as a template to create basically a Squirrel version of that virus, a version that targeted and wiped out Squirrels. Now, this worked well, but maybe a little too well, as the Squirrel alien race was then kind of at great risk overall because of the virus, which, yeah, I feel kind of bad about that part. Number 3. Made out on Jean's grave. I mean, this whole storyline was really a strange one. This happened because Jean's psychic ghost told me that it was okay and basically gave Emma and I her blessing after she died. Jean had apparently learned of an alternate future where everything went haywire because I wasn't fit to lead the X-Men and hoped that me finding happiness would be a good way to prevent this from coming about. Emma and I could have been a little more tasteful though, perhaps, when it came to the location in which we chose to express our feelings for one another. In retrospect, Jean's grave was probably not a good place for a makeout session. Number 2. Killed Professor X. Wow, okay. How can you really blame me for this one? I wasn't even myself at the time, must I remind you? So basically what had happened at this point was the Phoenix Force had returned to Earth during Avengers vs. X-Men. It had taken hold of 5 of us after Tony Stark split it up. Divided, the power was manageable to hold on to, but it also made it easier for the Avengers to defeat us. Slowly, those who were part of the Phoenix 5 were defeated and fell away. I was one of the last last people to hold onto the power, which meant, yeah, I kind of flew off the handle, and yeah, I kind of stole that last power from Emma Frost. The professor tried to talk me down and I just was not having it, so I took that power and I killed him. But afterward, I felt really bad about the whole thing, and even agreed that I needed to be basically put under arrest for my crimes. I didn't feel good about that one either, although some may have believed that Professor X had it coming. Number 1. Abandon his family. Okay, this is probably in retrospect one of the worst things I've done in the comics. After Jean died, I never thought I'd love again, until I met Madeline Pryor. Maddie was something else, and what's more, she weirdly resembled Jean. Like, we're talking almost identical. For a while, I thought she actually might be the reincarnation of Jean's soul, but then I thought, nah, that's silly. She probably has no relation to Jean whatsoever. We got married, had a son together, everything was going great, then Jean came back from the dead. Or she wasn't really ever dead? Anyways, it's all very confusing. Either way, she was back, that was all that mattered, so I returned to the X-Men, which kinda meant abandoning my wife and son in Alaska. Yeah. Maddie didn't take it too great, especially after she learned she was actually a clone of Jean Grey made by Mr. Sinister for the sole purpose of mating with me. She got pretty evil and ensorcelled my brother to boot, and my leaving was a big motivation for her transformation from innocent bystander to evil sorceress whose powers mirrored and were on a similar scale to Jean's.